We are live. Welcome to the Bradbury Challenge, the podcast where three writers attempt to write one short story every week for 2016. My name is Maya, and I am here with Gerald and Chrissy. How are you guys doing this week?
Yay.
Show more enthusiasm.
Well, it is convention week, so convention week is crazy in general, and now the convention is started. So we did our convention stuff last night. I finally got some sleep last night, and I don't sleep well in weird beds, so I'm at a hotel. It's a very lovely hotel, but I still didn't sleep well because
I do the same thing. I like the look of your hotel room. It looks quite lovely.
It's beautiful. It's the best hotel I've ever stayed in. And we had a free continental breakfast where they had sausage and biscuits and gravy and bacon and fresh omelets.
I've ever had. Have you ever had a breakfast like that?
They had somebody standing there making you omelets with all this fresh stuff in it if you wanted it. And it's, like I said, it's the best hotel I've ever been in.
That's not a continental.
No, continental breakfast is like Danishes and coffee.
No, this is breakfast.
Wow.
This is the best breakfast I've had in a very long time. And it's from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., so all that time you can go get as much as you want.
Okay, when we're all done with today's podcast, definitely send me the name of that hotel because that's awesome. What kind of convention are you at?
It's called RadCon.
Is that like a comic convention? Is it a nerd convention?
It's a nerd convention. It's science fiction and fantasy. So there's a bunch of like panels about writing. There's a whole bunch of writers here. There's tons of people, selling their books. Lots of self-publishers. And so it's really good for me as an artist. And then there's also there's a guy named Dragon here. He does a lot of the costuming and armor making for True Blood.
Oh, fun.
And other shows like that. Yeah. And so Greg finished his armor, and he's going to be wearing that today and going and showing it off to Dragon because he's like an idol of his. And yeah, it's all sorts of amazing. So for the last week, it has been armor making, including I was helping with the armor making. In my limited capacity, I wasn't very good at it, but I learned a whole bunch about leatherworking.
Well, that sounds fun.
Mostly
this is the happiest sounding I've heard you in a long time.
So I got Gerald, more sleep last night than I have in a long time.
How was your week, Gerald?
Yeah, very good, I think.
Sweetie.
Seemed to have gone very quickly, so I don't know what I did, but yeah, it's one of my writing groups had a 1-year anniversary dinner, so that was last night. That was good, nice, and we had a new sort of writing group start up that was pretty close to here. That was good for that. It was slightly different, so yeah, all in all, pretty good.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I had a pretty busy week, just a lot of work, but I'm feeling a ton better, and I'm really looking forward to talking about today's stories. I'm getting a lot of background noise. Does anybody know who that is? Is that me? Is that you?
Greg was getting me some water.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to check, make sure there wasn't an audio problem that we wanted to take care of before we dive right into today's discussion. So, first question, did everybody finish their stories?
Yay.
Yay! No. Oh. No. Wah, wah.
Nope.
Did you start a story?
Yes.
Okay, you just didn't finish it.
I didn't start it.
How far did you get done in it?
Not very far at all this week. Like I said, this week was
crazy making.
This week was crazy.
Well, that's okay. You started one, and I know that you have it in you to finish this story and write another story next week, right?
That's true.
If anybody can do it, you can, because I sure can't write 2 stories in a week. Gerald, how long was the story that you worked on this week?
It was another one a section of my archetype story, so that was about 1,500 words. I wrote a couple of small flashes in one of the writing groups as well, which was kind of fun because we used, instead of having a theme, they introduced prompts. So
Mhm.
one was a bunch of words on cards, and you had to try and use all the words, and one was a photo, and you just sort of pick a photo at random, and you write a little piece of flash about that. So I'll be reading that one a little later, but yeah, it's and the archetypes thing. I'm really enjoying that because as I'm going to have to go back and rewrite the early ones because the later ones are so much more.
They're better.
Yeah, they're better, and there's much more depth to them. So yeah, it's definitely one of these things where you once you start writing short fiction, or in my case, restart, the early bits are a little bit rough and a bit sort of not too
I
good.
feel you. I
Yeah.
feel you on that. This week, I really suffered from writer's block, and it wasn't a matter of, you know, there being a problem with me. It was a matter of I couldn't figure out what story I wanted to tell this week. I love writing prompts in theory.
Okay.
But I don't write well from writers writing prompts. I can do free writing from writers prompts, but I can never really get a story from a writer's prompt. And and so I took a different approach, and it's definitely the model for this week's writer's prompt, where instead of taking a sentence or words or a picture, I randomized it as far as I need a character, I need a desire, and I need an obstacle.
Wow.
Like, that's how bad
Very
things
good.
got over here. And it actually ended up being a really good exercise for me. Um,
Mm.
and I came up with a story that's very different from what I normally would write. It's not good.
It's
It
not
isn't
good.
good. Literally, the last 100 words could be a flash in and of itself. It's flash fiction. I tried to keep it under 500 words, which for me is like a huge challenge
Mm.
to weed down. And now I'm looking at the story and I'm realizing I kind of like it, but I want to try something a little bit more experimental with it.
Ooh.
And so I'm looking at, you know, because what I wrote is the obvious story, at least until the last paragraph. It's the obvious story. And so now I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, what is the less obvious story?
Mm.
And that's something that, I'm going to be working on with this particular story. I like the story. I think it has potential, but it's not the story that I want yet.
Okay.
When you're writing flash fiction, what kind of process do you go through as far as figuring out your idea and then, deciding how you're going to structure it?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about this because it at this sort of new. It was like a local friend of mine was running it. They got funding from the Arts Council and stuff, and it's to encourage new writers. And I sort of went along just to be there and to support her. But actually, I ended up really enjoying it and enjoying the creation of new little bits of story. But one thing that became obvious, particularly with me and a couple of others who have been writing for a little while, is that whatever prompts you get, you end up writing the same sort of story. So, so there was the first one the first one that was, and it was 100 and something odd words, but the first one was which was based on a random collection of words. The woman leading group said, "Oh, it's very mysterious. It's quite dark. It's quite menacing." And the second one, which was about a photo of a town, and it was very nice, and she said, "That's kind of dark too." So so I'm just and I'm not surprised because that's what I write. That most of my short fiction is dark. It's it's crime, it's horror, it's supernatural. It's it's not uplifting by and large.
And that's why we get along so well, Gerald.
Yeah, probably yes. So I think because I wrote down true writer, like finding your true voice and what you want to write, and there's no point in trying to force yourself to write something you know you can't. And I've tried to write, I've tried to write romance, I've tried to write humor, a couple of other things I've tried to write. I can't do it. I just cannot do it. I'm no good at it. So I stick to what I do. So whatever prompt you give me, it's gonna turn dark.
That's funny.
Well, I think everyone has their own aesthetic. Even if, like for me, I like to try different things just to see, just to push my skills, to see what I'm capable of. But there are certain themes that always show up in my writing.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what prompt I'm giving, what character I'm working with, what the obstacles are. It does not matter. There are certain themes that seem to be present in all of my writing. I think it's because those are the themes that I'm constantly thinking about in my subconscious, and they come out through my writing, most definitely.
Yeah, I think so. Do you find that, Christy?
I'm trying to think. I know I have several themes that run through a lot of my stories, but sometimes I'll just do something weird just because.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's just because I tend to read all over the place, and so I have a theme of young innocent girls that have not seen the world going out and having their eyes opened, I guess. And I have a theme of abusive relationships in a lot of my stories, but I try not to mix them, and I try to.
Well, you might be really successful if you do.
Well, and
not really.
Get away from some of those things, and because I know it's me working through some of the things that happened to me as when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, everybody's like, you shouldn't have rape in your stories. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. And I'm like, but I have a reason I'm writing about these things.
Yeah.
These things happen to people. So you need to write about them.
Totally.
So I don't know.
For me,
it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah. For me, I always have a theme of identity, and I've talked before about the symbol of water appearing through most of my writing. This week, my story, I think it's probably the only story I've written that water does not appear. It takes place in a desert. And so a lack of water.
Yeah, I know.
There you
I
go.
know.
Water's not a thing, but it is.
Yeah, there you go. But what I found interesting about my story this week is I had this character. I knew what she wanted. I knew what the obstacle was. And so I wrote it, I was feeling writer's block. So rather than going into the story with an overreaching story, it was, what happens next? I wrote a sentence. And then what happens? I wrote a sentence. And it was very methodical.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went back and read it, I realized that it wasn't bad, but if I restructured it, it might work, which I wasn't expecting. I was expecting it to read like an outline or just a mess. And so one of the things I'm considering is pushing my idea of how to structure a story. We've been reading George Saunders on Literary Roadhouse. We read Black Box on Literary Roadhouse. We've read these stories that are split up in sections, or they're split up in ideas. And so I'm looking at how I can take some of those things that I've been reading, that I've been enjoying, and attempt to use them in this story. So in this story, I've got a woman with her baby, and they're driving to Las Vegas, and she decides to take a detour to go take some photos of a petroglyph, and the car breaks down. And they're on a side road in the middle of nowhere, car's broken, baby has asthma, it's getting late, and it gets really cold in the desert. And so she has the heater on, of course runs down the battery, because the heater's on. So, and then, she has to make this choice between staying in the car when possibly nobody may come and they may freeze to death, or trying to walk several miles back to the highway with her baby. And she decides to walk several miles back to the highway with the baby. And then the next scene, actually isn't a scene, which is something I've never done before. The next scene is a statement in the newspaper about finding a dead woman and a baby that is recovered alive from the stomach cavity of a dead coyote. And so,
Wow.
like, yeah, so I'm thinking, like, the way I've written it, because I wrote it as, and then what happens? And then what will she see? And then what will she feel? And I noticed at the beginning of the story, it's a very long section about what she's experiencing and she's driving, and then as she gets as things get more dire, the sentences are shorter, and there's some gaps that happen as she's starting to get tired. And I'm thinking about time stamping. So having it be each one of these little sentences or stanzas is her looking at the clock and seeing the time. So at the beginning, she's going to look at the time, and then like the next time stamp might be 2 hours later because she's happy. And then when she's really freaking out, timestamps are going to be really close together because she keeps looking at the clock. And then the timestamps end, and then you've got this newspaper report. And I'm thinking that might be an interesting way to approach the story. And it's something I haven't tried. I'm going to test it out and see if it works. But when you're trying something experimental like that, how do you know if it works? Like, that's where I'm at. I'm like,
Exactly. So last night I started writing another short story, and it was because while we were driving here, it's a 4-hour drive, and I was driving mostly on my own because Greg was passed out in the chair beside me, and it was really foggy, and you couldn't see very far ahead of you, and there were no cars. So I started thinking of this story about a woman who gets stuck on the side of the road.
Oh,
And-
no.
Hi, Maya.
these are the things that go through your head when you're driving through the middle of nowhere.
I know, and so we just kind of, I think it's amusing that we came up with similar stories.
What happens if I get stranded out here? Will anybody ever find me?
Well, yeah, I started writing down a list, just like you did, of all of the things that went wrong, like her battery died, and her cell phone couldn't pick up reception for GPS, and then she couldn't see anything because of all the fog, and she's like, where am I? Am I getting close to the town? Did I miss the town? Because I actually did miss an entire city because it was so foggy and I couldn't see the city as we were driving past it. So, yeah.
That is really interesting that we both, because we haven't talked all week.
No.
And then like, our brains just connected somehow. That is too funny.
It's strange because I listened to an audiobook, a short audiobook, and I can't remember who the author was. It was about 5 years ago or something. But it was a story about a guy driving his car in the fog on the motorway or the highway, and he comes to a service station. So he pulls in, and there's not many people around, and so he carries on driving, drive, and he sees another service station. So he pulls in. It's the same service station. So it's just stuck in this sort of foggy loop sort of thing, and it was a fantastic story.
Twilight Zone.
Yeah. Drive away, but you can't leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, that is too funny. So what did you feel you achieved this week as far as your writing? Do you feel like you made any breakthroughs or had any differences in your writing this week?
I just checked my stats, and I wrote 1,800 words this week.
Wow.
That's the least I've written since NaNoWriMo, since before NaNoWriMo. So
that's more than a lot of writers write. Like a lot of professional writers don't actually write that many words per week. So I wouldn't feel bad about that.
Well, I don't, because I accomplished a lot of other things. Just none of it had to do with writing.
Except for those 1,800 words. You keep saying none, but you wrote 1,800 words. Take credit where credit is due.
I do. And most of it was on my novel, so I'm that much closer to finishing my novel, which is great. I want it done because I've already got scheduled to get a book cover, and I've got scheduled to have it edited, and I want it done and out, and I never have to look at it ever again.
Yeah, as my manuscript's sitting for yet another month without being opened, I understand the feeling of not wanting to look at something ever again. How
Yeah.
about you, Gerald?
Yeah, that's kind of funny because I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but one of the writing groups I'm in is a critique group,
Hmm.
and I happened to see them outside the group, and they said, "Oh, are you going to submit another part of this crime story that I stopped writing?" And I said, I don't know. And they said, "You should. The bit you did before was really good." And I kept looking at it, kept looking at it. I think I talked last week about inserting structure into it, and that wasn't
Hmm.
working. Um, but what I did, again, it's this getting out of your normal work zone. Um, I went into a cafe, and I just had a little notepad, and I thought, and the first thing I wrote down is what was the problem? You know, why am I stuck? Because I don't have enough storylines. I don't have enough characters. Da, 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 da. Within 20 minutes, it's mapped out. It's sorted. It's so that I feel really good about that. And I've just started working on it again this afternoon. Um, so I'm very positive about that.
I feel good about the fact that I had such severe writer's block and I forced myself
Mhm.
to overcome it, even though it's a really short story. For me, the shorter the story, the more craft it takes. And so for me, that is not an easy way out at all. And I feel like I came out of that with something that I could definitely work with, which I wasn't expecting. I was expecting, I would have just been happy to have some words on the page that I never saw again, just as long as there were some words on the page. And so I feel like that was a huge achievement. And I realized that I got out of that by really drilling down to like my most basic skills. So rather than thinking about some all encompassing story with a lot of symbolism, a lot of theme, I didn't have any of that because I was completely blocked. And I drilled it down to who's my character? What does she want? What's in her way? And I managed to get something written. And sometimes that's, remembering that you can drill that down to such a small, minute, set of things, set of
Mm.
items can really help you bust through a block. And
Yeah.
so that was my huge like threshold crossing this week. I feel like my challenge this week was language. Definitely my language this week was not up to par. I read my story, it does not read like my other work. It's just my fluid use of language was just toast this week. I'm like, where's all my words? And that's okay. But it was very challenging because I'm used to having, lots of flowery language, lots of description, lots of senses, and this week none of that was there. I was just, what happened?
Lovely.
I guess we all have those weeks, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's funny. I helped a local writer who's part of our local nano group, and I just sort of said to her online one day, how's the writing going? She said, oh, I haven't written anything for 3 or 4 weeks. I just can't seem to, and now I'm blocked. And so what I did was I told her to hold her arms out and form a circle with her fingers like this, and then write 100 words on what she saw through that circle. And and then we sort of did a couple more exercises where we built it up and wrote more and it's just sometimes just the act of writing gets you through a block, I
Yeah,
think.
because inertia works both ways. So the
Mm.
longer you don't write, the harder it is to start again.
Oh yeah.
And if you feel yourself getting blocked, don't sit there and be like, well, I'll wait until tomorrow, and then tomorrow, well, I'll wait until tomorrow. Just do something, even if it's something that really, really basic, that really doesn't mean anything,
Yeah.
just do what you can.
Okay. Yeah.
That's fine because you're coming through fine. So
Yeah.
just, yeah. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it.
I'm not worried.
So as far as my challenges, I talked about my threshold crossing. For me, my challenges this week, obviously, was my language. How about you guys?
What was that?
Your challenges this week? Did you?
Oh, just time.
Just time. How about you, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, as I said a few minutes ago, it was unblocking a blocked story, and that, and again, just moving out of your normal environment and pen and paper. And I don't normally writing on pen and paper just because I think it's not in my computer, so it's wasted. So, but
I know
no.
that feeling.
Yeah, because then you have to transpose it, and you think it's taking time, but in actual fact, it's the best thing.
I used to love writing things via paper, and now I can't do it. Every time I put something on paper, I'm like, I have to put this back in the computer afterwards. Why am I doing this? This is such a waste of time. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of everyone's time. Just put it in the computer and it's there.
Yeah.
So I actually have a program on my phone that uploads it to the the internet so that I can do the that thing. I can edit it and add it to whatchamacallit.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah. I was just seeing if maybe it would help you.
Well, it wasn't that I was Cyloning, it was that you guys were Cyloning.
Yeah, but we're not. So that tells me that the bandwidth that you're getting isn't coming through. So, if that happens, just go ahead and click the button for the camera. And if it's still Cyloning, there's a little bar thing that you can lower to reduce your bandwidth. And sometimes that helps.
It's just mostly that I want to be able to hear you guys when you speak.
Exactly. So, Chrissy, the story that you started this week, what is it about?
Well, I was working on the one I started last week about the scientists down in the ocean that find the metal claw.
Mm-hmm.
And I got further with that. I only have a little bit more to go before it's finished. And then I started the one about the person stuck on the side of the road last night.
I like the idea of finding a metal claw in the middle of the ocean. That's a little creepy.
Yeah. Well, they're researching a part of the ocean where ships will not go because it's right next to an island, and that there's been so many shipwrecks that ships will not go there, and they don't know why because there's not a shoal or anything. There's no sandbars, no coral reefs, nothing. So they're like, why is this happening? And then they find a metal claw.
Ooh.
It's kind of Captain Nemo-esque.
And Gerald, which archetype did you write on this week?
I worked on one that I'd looked at and couldn't find a story. So it's the old woman archetype, and I started off by writing her, this is old woman, she doesn't really know. But I was thinking I've done the guy with Alzheimer's, but she's actually a professor or something. I haven't quite decided yet, but she's actually really intelligent. But because she's an old woman, people think she's an old woman. So when in the final piece, whatever that turns out to be, she comes to the fore because people will see her as this woman that shuffles around and goes to the store and buys milk. But actually, she's very, very intelligent, very bright, and solves all the problems.
I love it. Well, one of our listeners had a suggestion for us. They suggested that it might be fun if... Wow, now I'm getting the Cyloning.
Fine for me.
One of our listeners had a suggestion. They suggested that it might be fun if we read a little bit of our story, either our favorite sentence, our worst sentence. So I asked you guys, do you have anything that you would like to share this week?
Yeah, I have something, and I can't. Worst sentence. Worst. I can't write a sentence that's bad, and I know it doesn't sound. I don't want to sound conceited, but if as I type it, as I look at it, if it's bad, I just get rid of it straight away. I can't, I
How do
can't
you know it's
read it
bad in the moment, though?
because
Because sometimes I write a sentence and I think it's good, and then a month later I look at it, I'm like, no, that was bad.
Oh no, 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 no. I know. I must write really bad sentences.
I need whatever magic pill that you've taken.
Well, I'll read this a little bit. It's a piece of flash. It's only 92 words, and we were given a prompt of an empty wine bottle. So this is again, it sort of shows where I'm coming from with my short fiction. Sunlight streaming through the dark green bottle created images in the sand. Swirls of colour scooped and dived through the undulations on the beach. A minuscule crab walked hesitatingly towards the colours, stopped, and perhaps sensing the heat generated by the magnifying glass effect, scuttled away again. A tiny gust of wind moves a few grains of sand, piling them up microscopically by the side of the bottle. Crime scene tape flutters quietly, and in the sand next to the body, blood-red dots draining away in the heat of the day. So yeah, it's
I
wine
like
bottle
the
hit
little
a
grains
murder.
of sand piled up next to the wine bottle. I like the tiny
Yeah,
details very much.
yeah, yeah.
I do love small details. The one that I'm reading is the end of the story I'm working on this week, and it's horrible. I like the idea of it, but it's horrible. And it is the newspaper report. A dirt biker found a deceased 30-year-old African-American woman in the Mojave Desert. Police also recovered an infant from the stomach cavity of a dead coyote. The child was found alive with a bloody tire iron nearby. If you have any information, please contact the Kern County Sheriff Department.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay, that really could be a short story in and of itself.
Grandma, what big eyes you have.
Hey, it was found alive.
Do they call the baby Red?
No, the baby is Pearl. The coyote was dead. And there's a tire iron nearby. The coyote did not eat the child.
No.
The mother killed the
It's
coyote.
a joke. Bye. I'm just kidding. The whole Red Riding Hood thing.
Yeah.
I know, I'm just teasing you back.
Okay. How dare you tease me back? I'm allowed to joke with you. You're not allowed to joke back. Come on.
Oh, maybe.
Okay. I did find a thing I could share.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
This is from the one I've been working on about the scientist in the deep. She didn't hear or see Paul's acknowledgement, but she saw his figure moving off. They moved through the wall of kelp, waving aside strands to see through the foliage. Turning back to the golden pipe in her hand, she moved her fingers down the length to the clump of kelp holding it in place. A metal hinge greeted her fingers. "There's a hinge here," she said. "There's more under the kelp. I'm clearing it away now." They acknowledged, and she continued pulling away, strand after strand, exhuming more of the shape before her. And the object that emerged from beneath the red carpet of seaweed was unlike anything she had seen before. There you go.
Wow.
Woohoo!
That's good.
I like this new addition to the podcast. Do you guys think we
Yeah.
should keep it?
Oh,
I like it.
I like it too. So I want to thank our listener for their wonderful suggestion. And if you have any other suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Let's do this week's writer's prompt. This week's writer's prompt is really more of a game. So here's what I want you to do. You're going to get a piece of paper, and you're going to write the numbers 1 to 5 in 3 lists. It's better if they're on 3 different pieces of paper, because then you can't see it. So on the first list, you're going to write 3 characters, no more than a 5-word description of this character. So it might be the angry psychologist, it might be a frustrated love interest, just whatever. A woman with child, write 5 characters. On the second list, you're going to write 5 things that people may want. Make 2 of them things that you want, 2 things that you want more than anything else, and 3 things that people who are not like you want. And on the third list, you're going to write 5 things that may prevent somebody from getting something. It might be police, it might be fear, it might be, whatever. Location, just 5 fears. Now you have 2 options here. You can use dice, but I used random.org's integer calculator, and you're going to select 3 random numbers. You're going to put your list next to each other, and you're going to pick a character, pick a desire, and pick an obstacle. And that is your writer's prompt.
Very good.
And so, until next time, if you have any comments or you would like to look at our other podcasts, including Literary Roadhouse, one short story once a week, and Literary Roadhouse Book Club, please visit literaryroadhouse.com.